Well, what an adventure we've been on within City. And Crew has been experiencing a lot of changes over these last few years. And since City began, we've been on an entrepreneurial adventure of going into the wild fields of the cities and trying to figure out how is it that we can bring the gospel to every person within our cities. About 4 years ago, we were gathering with some city leaders in San Diego. There was about 60 in the room, and we asked them, can you describe what you do? Or how do you explain what you do as City to your donors? And in the process of that workshop, there were about 60 people in the room, and we had about 80 different answers as to what City was. And it was then that we realized we need to have more clarification and understanding of what City's contribution is in light of the ministry of Crew. And that began us on a great adventure of the City messaging, which has resulted recently in the Roadshow. The adventure began when we hired an outside consulting group to help us with qualitative and quantitative research, asking a wide variety of people from different cities and demographics within the U.S. what is their impression of Christian organizations and ones like Crew. And what we discovered from that research was that our audience, those within the city, had very specific needs and desires from a Christian organization. And that has begun to shape and form how we present our messaging and our approach to the city. And let me give you just a very brief rundown of what we cover through our 5 modules in the Roadshow. First module we discuss, and many of you are familiar with already, is the fact that the city is a wild open field. And it's a field where there's a lot of adverse situations like the weather, there's competition, there's the reality of societal changes and shifts, especially what we've been experiencing over the last 10 years, rapid sociological changes. The city is not like a greenhouse. A greenhouse is great because we have great results. We can measure those results. We can fund those results, and we can report on those results. For example, if we want to reach as many people with the gospel, we realize that, well, we need to share the gospel with this many people. These ones will respond to this strategy. And as we move along in that process, we begin to tweak and we begin to adjust to become more effective. Well, a greenhouse is just like that. We want to produce as many quality strawberries as possible. And so only certain people are allowed into that greenhouse. Right nutrients, right environment, right sun, right water, and we're going to get our desired results. And really that greenhouse environment is what Western evangelical culture has thrived in over the last 40, 50, 60 years, and Crew itself. But what we realize is that we can't implement those greenhouse environments in the open field of the city. And our staff were facing some frustration, some difficulty, wondering, how do I measure what I'm doing? How do I know when I'm successful? How do I explain my contribution to advancing the gospel within the context of the city? So our first module within the Roadshow is to really explore the paradigm of what it means to be in an open, wild field of the city. And how do we bring order to that? How do we bring success to evangelism and proclamation of the gospel within the cities? We have several other modules that we go through that stem from the research. And from the research, we discovered that there are 7 personas within the city, all along a scale of belief, from anti-dogmatic to a Christ follower, a guide, someone that is with us and is on board with us. How do we message City to those people all along the spectrum of belief, from the anti-dogmatic to the content, to the curious, to the disillusioned, the follower, and the guide? And our workshop engages all the participants in identifying who are the relationships we currently have and how are we bringing the gospel to those people and making it approachable to them. In the process of the research, we've also discovered the deepest needs of all people along the spectrum of belief. And we've created a concentric circle. The first circle of need that people have is a need for peace. The second circle inside is the need for prosperity, for my needs to be met. And the third circle, the most intimate circle, and the need of their life is a need for purpose. And what we've realized historically as Crew, we have immediately, historically, gone to purpose when the people within the city are saying, wait a second, I need to know that you care about my needs for peace and for prosperity before you enter into purpose. So our gospel proclamation takes a lot longer. It takes a lot longer to sow those seeds within the field and to build that trust that are needed from all those people along the scale of belief. Well, in the Roadshow, we present this content, the research, the findings from the research, and we engage with each of the participants. And what we have found is people are responding to this approach to what does it mean to bring the gospel and having gospel proclamation within cities in light of the needs of our audience and where people are and how do we journey with them and come alongside them in their journey and as they're experiencing the gospel and experiencing us as a Christian organization. So as we identify current sociological trends, rapid changes within our culture, the needs that people have, the fears that they have, the expectations of what they think of Christians are going to have an agenda with them, we begin to break all those down and realize how do we, as Christ followers, effectively share the gospel and proclaim the gospel within the cities. Another thing that the research revealed to us is that all these personas along the spectrum of belief have 5 things that need to be true in order to trust us to have a relationship and a conversation about spiritual content. And those 5 things are, the first thing is that they need to believe that we're going to follow the conversation and not have an agenda. So we begin to deconstruct what does that look like to value the other person? Where are they in their journey? Asking them questions. The second thing that's required is that we walk in their shoes. We understand their story. And that begins by following the conversation and listening. The third one is how do we find common ground? What do we agree with? Even though we may be on various spectrums of belief, politically, economically, racially, what are the areas where we can find common ground? The fourth element that's necessary is that we need to talk like a real person. Use words that are meant for people, not just for the pews. And we need to translate our Christianese into language that's understandable to people all along their spectrum of belief. And the fifth thing that our research revealed to us is that we need to tell a better story than the one they're expecting to hear. They have presuppositions as to who we are as Christians and what our agenda is with them. And we have the opportunity to master the story of the gospel and relate to their deepest needs, meeting their common ground needs that we have with them, and bringing in the story of the gospel, the whole narrative of Scripture, and to speaking to the deepest needs that they have. And as we have done this, we found that people all the way from anti-dogmatic to curious, to the content, to the disillusioned, the follower and the guide, and the anxious, all of these people along the spectrum of belief are willing to have conversations and willing to enter in. But what we need to do is to begin to capture those moments, millions of moments and millions of conversations throughout the city, as opposed to just trusting in events where we're gathering people to come to our events and to come to our programs and to come to our education. How do we enter into their world and engage with them on their spiritual journey? How do we journey together with them so that they feel that we can be a trusted partner with them in their spiritual journey? We approach a lot of the research by tossing out what we've learned and then having engagement and conversations in the workshop environment. And where it's been really effective is working with local churches and partners and leaders within our communities and cities. Definitely was initially geared towards staff, our city staff. Now, as we've done that for our city staff, they've brought denominational leaders and church partners and other parachurch organizations, and they're saying we could use some help of how to bring the gospel, to proclaim the gospel within the wild fields of the city. And so we are hosting 3 road shows this spring. We've already done 6 of these throughout the country. And at these road shows, we're going to begin partnering with our campus ministry friends within Cru and presenting this as a measure of how can we resource all of Cru in light of the roadshow and explaining what our posture is within city and what the opportunities are that we have to proclaim the gospel within our cities and how it looks different, how it needs to look different in order for us to have a fighting chance to bring the gospel to the fields of the city.